Coming up, Trae Young silences Boston in the final seconds. This is Locked On Game to Game, NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. Local experts joining us to go over the biggest stories from last night's playoff action in the NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Trae Young extended the Hawks season with a deep three in the final seconds to give Atlanta a win in Boston last night. Locked On hosts with both teams give their takes after a thrilling finish at the TD Garden.
Hello, friends. My name is Brad Rowland, and the Atlanta Hawks have forced the series back to Atlanta with a Game 5 upset victory up in Boston behind Trae Young, who was magnificent down the stretch of this game. Scored the final 14 points for the Hawks, ended up with 38 points and 13 assists, including the game winner over the outstretched arms of Jaylen Brown in the closing seconds. And the Hawks erased a 13-point deficit in the final 6 minutes on the road up against it as a double-digit underdog against a better team in a lot of ways with the Celtics. But the Hawks were very gritty in this game. They won the three-point battle along the way, hitting 19 and tying season high three-point range, and also holding Boston to a 12 of 38 from three-point range to kind of nullify some of Boston's advantages. And with this win, Game 6 now looms on Thursday back in Atlanta. The Hawks have a renewed sense of optimism, I am sure, especially with this victory coming without DeJounte Murray, who'll be back for Game 6. And now Boston has to make the long trip, and things are definitely more perilous now for the favorites in this series. We'll talk about all of what transpired and more on the Locked On Hawks podcast.
Boston Celtics got too cute, too comfortable, and Trae Young stole Game 5 from the Celtics. Now they got to go back to Atlanta to close out this series. I'm John Corrales of the Locked On Celtics podcast here at the TD Garden. Celtics lose at 119-107. They were in control, up 11 with not that much to go in the fourth quarter. And then Trae Young just got going, hits the game-winning shot. This is an embarrassing loss for the Celtics. Jason Tatum sat there in Atlanta after the Celtics took that 3-1 lead and said, we can't do what we did last year and get too comfortable and let a series get too long. That's exactly what they did. Now they've got to answer to that, and they blow a real golden opportunity to get a few days rest before facing the Sixers and having 3 days off between games 2 and 3. So now they got to go back to Atlanta to close this thing out.
The Timberwolves fought all the way until the end, but ultimately saw their season come to an end in Denver last night. Locked On Wolves looks back on the game and the season.
The shorthanded Minnesota Timberwolves just fell short against the Denver Nuggets in Game 5 and are now eliminated from the playoffs. I'm Ben Beacon, host of the Locked On Wolves podcast, and the Timberwolves led by double digits early in this game. Anthony Edwards came out of the gate like he was shot out of a cannon and ultimately had a really good game, finished at 29 points. Did take him 27 shots to get there. He was 0 of 6 outside the arc, including the most important three-point attempt of the night with just over 2 seconds to play and a chance to tie the game. Anthony Edwards just back-rimmed a three-point attempt, and the Wolves were sent home for the summer. Ant also added 8 rebounds, 7 assists, and again, a general all-around solid game from him. Karl-Anthony Towns had 26 and 11, got better as the game wore on, and played really strong defense against Nikola Jokic, giving him a lot of trouble. But both he and Rudy Gobert fouled out in the final minutes of this game. The Timberwolves struggled mightily on the defensive glass, missing open shots. We're going to break it all down on the post-game pod. Subscribe to Locked On Wolves for all things Timberwolves.
That'll do it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. It's the playoffs. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On NBA and your favorite team's Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.